This podcast is not meant to be professional advice of any kind. It is meant to be informative and entertaining. If you make any changes to your life, see the appropriate professional before you do so. Welcome to Super Age. My name's David Stewart. I am the founder of Ageist and your host on the Super Age Show. We talk about how to live healthier, how to live longer, and how to be happier. And who doesn't want that? Today's show is brought to you by Inside Tracker, the dashboard to your inner health. Go to insidetracker.com/ageist. Save 20% on all their products. Today's show is also brought to you by Ned's Mellow Magnesium, designed to help busy people sleep better. Go to helloned.com/ageist and save 15%. Get yourself some better sleep. Today's show is also brought to you by Timeline Nutrition with their breakthrough product, MitoPure, the first clinically tested urolithin A supplement, which is showing tremendous results for mitochondrial health. Go to timelinenutrition.com/ageist, use the code ageist at checkout, and save 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Welcome to episode 141 of the Super Age Podcast. It is great to have you with us. This will be dropping on July the 5th, 2023. So I hope everyone had a wonderful 4th of July. I love the 4th of July. I remember being as a kid, fireworks and the county fair and all that. It's a holiday that doesn't really seem to have a lot of downsides. And to all of our friends out there who are of French ancestry, thank you to the big country of France who, because of all the awesome stuff that you guys did during what we call the Revolutionary War, we are now an independent country. And without you guys, that wouldn't happen. So thank you, France. This week on the show, we have back Dr. Michael Breus, otherwise known as the Sleep Doctor. And Michael is just back from, I believe, Stockholm, Sweden. We'll have to ask him, but my recollection is the sleep doctor has spent some time in a place where it doesn't get dark. So I'm really curious about speaking to a sleep expert about what it's like being in a place where it doesn't get dark. I mean, that really has to affect the way people sleep. So Michael is always just a tidal wave of information around sleep. So you want to stay tuned for that. We're going to get with Michael in just a moment. And I want to address a reader question. So I had a question from Susan, who's one of our loyal readers, and she's in Portugal, where she contacted me. And she said, so what is the deal with these continuous glucose monitors? I see them everywhere. Should I get one? Now, my feeling on the continuous glucose monitor is it's fantastic. Yes, you should get one. In America, you have to get a prescription for one. God knows why, but you have to get a prescription for one here. I got one. It was called a Freestyle Libra. I got it from Walmart. I think it was $75. I got 2 of them in the package. Each one is good for, I believe, 14 days. I don't know what the deal is in other countries. So why do you want a continuous glucose monitor? Well, the reason you want this is because you want to know what happens with your blood sugar levels as you consume certain foods or engage in certain activities, or it's amazing how you will see how stress affects your blood sugar. And if there is one thing that people can do to increase their health, wellness, longevity, all of that stuff, it's eating a low glycemic diet. I feel I've been banging on this drum for decades, but that's the name of the game. Vegan, vegetarian, keto, paleo, whatever you're doing, Mediterranean. The most important thing here is keep the glucose spikes down. That's where the bad stuff happens. So I read a statistic earlier this week. I believe it was only 12%. That's right. 12% of the U.S. population is metabolically healthy. And that's defined as not being overweight, not having high blood sugar, not being on cholesterol meds of some kind, and not being pre-diabetic or diabetic. So only 12% of people. And what is the root cause of all that stuff? Blood sugar. So yeah, get a continuous glucose monitor. It's fascinating to see the way your, the combination with which you eat foods. Also, if you can eat something that has a lot of fructose, a lot of simple carbs in it. But if you eat it after you've eaten protein or something with some fiber, depending on your metabolism and your gut, it's not going to spike your glucose. So super interesting. My feeling is everybody should use one of these. I think it's just super informative, low impact, zero risk. They're $75 and you're going to learn what kind of foods do what to your blood sugar. So, Susan, get yourself a CGM if you can. And you don't have to wear these things like for life, right? You just do it for like a couple of weeks, maybe a month, do it like once a year or something, and you're going to learn so much. We're going to get with the sleep doctor, Dr. Michael Breus, in just a second after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by Ned's Mellow Magnesium. It's a sleep supplement that I've been taking for about 3 weeks, and it's great. I know a lot of you guys, we have problems sleeping. A lot of us, we wake up in the night or we have trouble getting to sleep, and you should check this out. So it's got 3 different kinds of magnesium. Magnesium is awesome to help us sleep. It's also one of the minerals that 75% of Americans are not getting enough of. Mellow Magnesium also has L-theanine and GABA, both of which are going to help us sleep. Personally, I take this about an hour before I'm ready to go to sleep. And my sleep efficiency for the last 3 weeks has been averaging, get this, 100%. So it's working for me. And so you guys might want to check this out. And full transparency, Ned shares all of its third-party lab reports right there on its site. So not just the research they do, but the research that everybody else does on their products. And that strikes me as a real vote of confidence from the brand on the products that they do. They have over 5,000 5-star reviews on their products. So I'm not the only one who likes this. You can't become the best version of yourself unless you're getting great sleep. Like nothing else works. You got to get sleep. So this is what you do. Go to HelloNed, that's HELLONED.com/ageist and get 15% off on all their products. Or if you forgot all that, just enter ageist, code ageist at checkout, and you get your 15% off there. Today's show is also brought to you by Inside Tracker, the dashboard to your inner health. On June 29th, Inside Tracker officially added insulin as one of the biomarkers they test, which is the key biomarker for sustained energy and an early warning for several chronic diseases. Inside Tracker has made great strides this year in adding biomarkers, ApoB, which is critical for heart health, as well as addressing 3 hormone markers that are especially important for symptoms related to aging. Go to insidetracker.com/ageist. Save 20% on all their products today. Just a quick reminder that after my chat with Dr. Michael Breus, the sleep doctor, we're going to have that little thing that we do at the end, that little fortune cookie called Just Try This. So stay tuned for that after my conversation with Michael Breus. Let's give the sleep doctor a call right now. Hey, Michael, how you doing today?
I am doing excellent, David. Thanks for having me on the show.
It is great to have you back. And my understanding is that you are recently back as a sleep expert, and I find this fascinating, in a place where it doesn't get dark.
That is correct.
I normally associate darkness with sleep. So tell me
too.
How did that go for you?
So it was pretty confusing. So I was in Sweden and I was at a conference called Brilliant Minds. And during the summer solstice, which is their longest day of the year, it literally doesn't get dark. It's kind of like, I think they call them white nights, is like the official term. And I'm usually associated with like places in that part of the world. But I have to tell you something. I personally had never experienced that before, and it was a little disconcerting. We were at a party. The party ended quite late, like 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're walking home, and it could have been noon. It was so bright out in the streets. Number one is from a safety perspective, it was kind of nice because we weren't worried about somebody being like around the corner and anything of that nature, which would have been not so fun. But it was very interesting from a sleep perspective. As a matter of fact, the last night that I was there, I didn't go to sleep. I just stayed up the whole night and then slept on the airplane home. Now that was helpful for me because I was moving my circadian clock for jet lag. But when you think about it, remember, light is the cue to your eyes that really resets your circadian rhythm every single morning. And darkness is what helps propagate melatonin. We call it the vampire hormone because it only comes out in darkness. And so, number one, vampires could not live in Sweden. I can assure you of that, or they would just have to stay in their coffin for quite a long period of time. But what was also interesting was the hotels. They all have mandatory blackout curtains. They also have eye shades for you because this is a known issue for them because so many of their patrons rather are not used to something like this, and so people end up staying up extraordinarily late. They're much later than they normally would because they just don't get tired because there's so much light.
So you were a visitor, but the locals, how do they manage this? Like, how does this affect their sleep and circadian? It sounds nuts.
Yeah. So I asked a few of them because I was like, okay, I'm curious. Like, you deal with this every year. I've only dealt with this one time in my life. Like, what do you do? And so, number one, they've been growing up with it almost their whole lives. And so most of the people there who I was talking to were natives of Sweden. By the way, unbelievably lovely people over there. I mean, couldn't be friendlier if they tried. And Stockholm, which is where we were staying, is actually a lot of islands, and there's a lot of tributaries and all this stuff. And so there's lots to do. Beautiful, beautiful city. But blackout curtains are a must. Every single one of them said, like, if you're in the blackout curtain business, this is the place you this is the place you want to be selling your wares for sure. Eye masks were a big thing as well, but really the timing is things that people had to kind of get down straight. And so what they do is they're very strict with their sleep schedules. Several different people that I spoke to said, look, it's not going to get dark. And so I know at 11 o'clock when, I happen to have an alarm because it doesn't feel like 11 o'clock. Then they also have dimmer switches in their homes. They, do the blackout curtains, and they actually create a sundown effect almost in their homes. And they stay in a lot of the times. And so it's not as popular to be going out to dinner. And remember, they eat a little bit later than we do here in the States. Like that, usually they don't have dinner until 8 o'clock, sometimes 9 o'clock. So their whole schedule kind of gets moved around socially a bit just during this real 2-week period. I want to be clear, it doesn't last forever. It's kind of this 2-week period where it's like this, but it's definitely an adjustment that people have to make.
I love what you said there. Like, they have to force themselves not to go out.
Yeah.
Because they'll be exposed to the sunlight and won't be able to sleep.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. And many of them are wearing sunglasses late into the evening. Right. Now, to be fair, I didn't see anybody wearing blue light blocking glasses. That probably would have been quite helpful. There wasn't a dimmer switch in my hotel room, so I put on blue light blocking glasses, not to be able to have so much of that blue light affecting me. It's pretty amazing, the scenario.
I'm just curious, are the Swedes known for having mental health problems? I have no idea.
No, they're a very happy group of people, as a matter of fact. I don't know what their rates of depression, loneliness, anxiety, things like that are. I would imagine, however, that if you did suffer from, let's say, anxiety or depression, if you did not follow a schedule during this very well-lit period of time, you would probably see an increase in a lot of those behaviors. I mean, this is a guess, but I think it's probably pretty accurate. I think you'd definitely see an increase in anxiety, an increase in depression. Also, if you're trying to stay in to not get exposure to that light, you don't have as much social interaction. And we know social interaction's got a lot to do with loneliness, a lot to do with depression. So I would imagine that there would be a time period there that would be affected. Also, as a kind of a side note, I would imagine that the teenage population would really get messed up during this period of time. Right? Since we know teenagers, biologically speaking, have a tendency to want to stay up late and sleep late anyway, I think this really throws some things into the mix that parents have to be very cognizant of and just educate their kids and try to put them onto a schedule because, they're going to be playing on social media, video games, going out with their friends. And you're like, Mom, Dad, like, it's not even dark out. Like, why should I come home type of thing? And it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
Bad place to have teenagers.
Yeah, it's not the place to bring your teenagers, especially for those 2 weeks.
So as we're talking about things that happen during the summer, one of the things that happens is mostly it gets warmer unless you live somewhere that it doesn't.
Right.
And talk to me a little bit. We talked a little bit about light. Talk to me a little bit about temperature.
Yeah. So second to light, temperature is easily one of the biggest factors for sleep. And so the way the biology on this works is quite interesting. And so your core body temperature rises till about 10:30 at night. Then it hits a peak and then it begins to drop. that drop turns out to be a signal to your brain to release melatonin. So for folks out there to remember, melatonin is kind of that key that starts the engine for sleep. Yeah, there's other things that you need, but you ain't sleeping if you ain't got no melatonin, right? Also, melatonin only comes out in darkness. So it's really, there's two cues inside the brain. It has to be dark and it has to be cool. Now, here's what happens. In the summertime, days are longer and it's a hell of a lot hotter. And so that really can have a pretty big effect. Now, for folks out there who may not know, I'm 55 years old. And as we move on into the 50s, 60s, 70s age range, the subcutaneous fat in our skin gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And so we don't have as much insulation. And so whatever the temperature is what our body feels. So we're colder in the winter and we're hotter in the summertime. And so this is the time where, maybe turning your air conditioning a little bit lower makes intuitive sense. One of the big things that I always recommend for all of my patients during this period of time, whether you're my age or younger, is change your linens. You don't need your winter comforter on your bed. You should have a summer weight comforter. Sheets, you should actually have either cotton or bamboo sheets, stuff that's can soak up any sweat and is very breathable. Also, another big factor that a lot of people don't think about is dehydration, right? So not only is it core body temperature that can affect your sleep, but if you're dehydrated, it's really not good for sleep. And sleep in and of itself is a dehydrative event. Most people don't realize this, but while you're asleep, in fact, just from the humidity in your breath, you are losing almost a full liter of water each night. That doesn't count for sweat, oils, things like that. So, when you wake up, you're pretty parched, right? And so I have a little wake up routine that I like to have people do. It's called the 3:15s. So when you wake up in the morning, you swing your legs over to the side of the bed, put your both feet planted on the ground, but you're still sitting. Take 15 deep breaths. This is to help center you. This is to help kind of kick in your respiratory system, kind of clear the cobwebs a little bit. Then you want to be drinking 15 ounces of water. So I say, you should have a glass of water that's room temperature sitting by your bedside anyway, in case in the middle of the night you get thirsty. So just slug it, like don't sip it, just down it, get it down and get it in. Then walk over to the window, or better yet, walk outside if it's early and still nice and cool outside, and get 15 minutes of sunlight. Sunlight does the opposite of what the darkness and the cool does. It actually stops the melatonin faucet in your brain. You have very specific cells in your eye called melanopsin cells, and these send a signal to your brain to turn that faucet off. And so by doing these 3:15s in the morning, you have a much greater chance of kind of clearing the cobwebs, not feeling too sleepy during the daytime, and kind of starting your day in a very bright and kind of shiny way. Again, keeping your temperature cooler during the daytime, especially in the summer months. I mean, I happen to be fortunate. I'm in Los Angeles where the weather is nice almost year round. But, if you live in Texas, it's well over 100 degrees in Texas right now. And so a lot of people have to be careful of spending too much time outside. And so if you're an active person, which I am, and I know you are, and many of the listeners are, you need to really be careful, because what happens in a lot of these places, I used to live in Arizona. What happens is that you don't even feel the perspiration. You're outside, you're doing your thing. Maybe you're playing pickleball, you're going for a walk, you're taking your dog out, playing with grandchildren, children, what have you. You don't even realize you're sweating, and you're just evaporating water left and right. And so really make a concerted effort to be hydrating. Still go outside, nothing wrong with that. But again, thinking through this whole idea, make sure you're wearing a lot of sunblock. As we get older, we have a far greater likelihood of melanoma and skin cancers and things like that. I'm a very fair-skinned person. My son is super fair-skinned. He's a redhead. And so for all you ginger redheads out there, be aware, because the sun really has a big effect, because you have less pigment in your skin. And there's actually been some data looking at some sunblocks can have an irregular effect on your hormones. And so you really want to stay with the primarily zinc-based sunblocks here. You really want to avoid a lot of the parabens and things like that are known in some of these sunblocks. Now, to be fair, those zinc-based, they're tough. Like you got to really rub them in and really kind of get them on top of your skin, and then it looks kind of streaky and whitish. That'll go away once you kind of go outside and are active for a few moments. But thinking through this whole idea of hydration, activity, sunlight, all very, very good for you, but make sure to protect yourself as well. And temperature really is at the base of all of this. Again, you don't want to get too warm in the later evening. So let's say you say, well, gosh, Michael, it's so hot outside right now. I don't want to go for a walk. I want to wait till the sun comes down. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but you do want to give your body a period of time to cool down before bed. And so what I would argue is, let's say your bedtime is 10 o'clock. And you want to go for a walk at 6 o'clock, I think that's fine. But going for a walk at 8 o'clock might not be the best idea because activity can raise that core body temperature. Now, if that's the only time that it's cool enough to do so, I have a trick, which is take a cold shower. There's nothing wrong with hopping in the shower, and instead of turning the water to the hot, I mean, I'm not saying you got to make it ice cold and make it an ice bath or anything like that, although there is some data to look at that as well. Just really get in the shower and slowly start to turn it colder, count to 30, colder, count to 30, colder, count to 30. You don't have to be shivering. I want to be clear about this. But again, bringing that core body temperature down is really going to have a positive effect on your sleep.
Absolutely. And on this temperature discussion, you mentioned having like a different sheet and
yes.
Comforter setup. How important is the mattress in this sort of thing?
So I think of the whole sleep system, right? So it's sheets, pillows, and mattresses. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing that's not the most popular thing that I say, but it's the truth, which is memory foam sleeps hot. And there are a lot of folks out there who may have a memory foam mattress. This is a situation where you can actually get an overlay or a topper on your mattress, which can actually be not made of memory foam. There are other foams that are not as heat absorbing or heat exerting that are out there that you can look at. Latex actually turns out to be one that's very, very good. And it's nice and bouncy, and it helps you turn. The thing I don't like about memory foam is once I kind of get stuck in it, like it's hard to move. I have a tendency to move quite a bit in our sleep. Most people do. So I tell people all the time, now is actually not a bad time to think about buying a new bed. Over on the sleepdoctor.com, we actually do reviews of beds, specifically beds for times of high temperature. If you have a tendency to have night sweats, if you have a tendency to sleep hot, believe it or not, there's some beds that have materials in them that are very, very helpful from a cooling perspective. Also, there are overlays like Chili Sleep has something and 8 Sleep has something that can be nice because you can actually change the temperature on your mattress, believe it or not. The technology has gotten quite sophisticated these days, which can be super duper helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I have a bit of a dispute on the temperature. I think most couples do.
Oh, yes. That's the number one thing that people have disagreements about, for sure.
I set it at 64 because that's when I like to sleep. And the solution is my wife gets double comforters.
Yep.
And then we're all happy.
And so there's also a couple of more sleep hacks that I can give you if you're having a little bit of marital discord due to the temperature. So one is sleeping in the nude. And so sleeping without clothing on, there's less of a barrier. Your body thermoregulates a lot better. But for people who want to stay that warm and like that comfy, cozy feeling, socks turn out to be very, very good. You lose a lot of heat through your feet because there's no hair on the bottom of your feet. Right. And so what I tell people all the time is, look, get your feet out from under the covers, right? And don't have socks on, and you will cool down almost immediately. I mean, many people will recognize this idea is if you're hot in the middle of the night, what do? You put your feet out from under the covers, and then boom, your whole body has a tendency to cool down. You feel a lot better. If you start out that way, you're actually in pretty good shape.
That's what my wife calls them, the cooling towers. When I put my feet out, that's my routine when I go to sleep.
Absolutely, and it really does work quite well. I also have another hack for people. So for folks out there who may not want to run their air conditioning all night long, because quite frankly, it gets expensive. When I was living in Arizona, I used to say all the time, if I could afford to cool my house to 68 degrees, I just wouldn't have any money left in the bank because, the daily high was 108, 110, 112, things like that. So what you can do is you can get a plastic bottle of water, throw it into the freezer, and then pull it out once it's frozen and put it into a tube sock, like an athletic sock, right? And then put it on the outside of your hips. immediately helps cool you down without getting the moisture. The reason you have the tube sock is because it absorbs the moisture that comes off of the plastic bottle. And then you don't have wet areas in the bed. But what's nice about it is it's a easy summer hack. And then in the morning time, you just take the cap off and you drink the water, and then you've got your water all right there.
Multifunctional.
Exactly.
Wonderful. And some people, there seem to be these different types of sleepers, right? Like
yes,
some
absolutely.
people are morning people, or some people are evening people. So talk to us a little bit about that, and how does that intersect with age?
Absolutely. So what you're talking about are these ideas called chronotypes. That happens to be the thing that I'm most well known for. My book, which is called The Power of When, and we can put in the show notes, we can put a little link to it if we'd like. This is a way that you can determine which one of these things you are. So it turns out they're genetic. A lot of people say, oh, I'm an early bird or I'm a night owl. Well, number one, you may or you may not be. If people want to go, I actually have a quiz online. It's called chronoquiz.com, chronoquiz.com. And what's cool about it is in 30 questions or so, we can tap into, with a fair degree of accuracy, which one of these you are. Now, we used to think there was early bird and there was night owl. Then in the kind of late 70s, mid 80s, we discovered, oh, there's people in the middle who are neither one of those. We used to call them hummingbirds. I'm not really sure why we called them hummingbirds. It seems like a kind of arbitrary thing, but I guess they were kind of keeping with the bird motif. So I discovered that I had patients that didn't fall into any one of these three categories. And so I said to myself, well, okay, let's look at the genetics and let's see if there's, genetically speaking, anybody else. So I really was focusing in on insomnia because that really is kind of my area of expertise. And what I discovered is that there is a group of people with insomnia, generally speaking, who have a very different genetic profile than an early bird or a night owl or somebody that's in the middle. Now, to be fair, I'm a human, not a bird. So I decided to rename the categories, and I used animals. And I used animals that actually represent the chronotypes that they are. So if you're an early bird, now you're a lion. I mean, who doesn't want to be the king or queen of the jungle, right? That's always a good thing to be. And these are my early risers, oftentimes the COO of a company. These are people who like to make a list every single day, and they go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. Very almost military or disciplined in their thinking. They're usually fairly active people. They like to do activities. They like to be up early, that kind of thing. People in the middle are called bears. Bears are kind of more what I call a solar sleeper. And to be fair, it's the best to be a bear. I wish I was a bear because most of the world runs on a bear's schedule. The 9 to 5 is perfect for a bear. They get up around 7:30. They like to go to bed around 10:30. So it works out quite well. 11:30 works out quite well for them as a general kind of guideline. These people are usually a very nice and agreeable group. They can be introverted. They can be extroverted. Most of them have a tendency to be a little bit more extroverted. These are the people that get the work done. They're kind of the glue for society. Night owls, I call them wolves. As we all know, wolves have a tendency to hunt at night. They are night creatures. And I've been a wolf for most of my adult life until fairly recently, until in my early 50s, I started to shift. And I'm going to explain why that happens in just a moment. But wolves are night people. We have a tendency to be very creative. These are my artists, my actors, my musicians. Like, if you ever talk to a creative person and you say, when did you get your inspiration for your latest project? They never say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? They always say 2 o'clock in the morning, because they're up then. They're great friends. They're usually the last people to leave the party type of people, and really very interesting group. They do have a tendency to be a bit introverted at times. I, for one, am not that introverted, but many wolves are. And then the final category, which is the one that I kind of really helped discover, I call them dolphins. Now, the reason I call them dolphins is because many people don't know this, but dolphins sleep unihemispherically. So what does that mean? So half of the brain is asleep while the other half is awake and looking for predators. And I felt like, they're never quite completely asleep, which is kind of like my insomniacs. Plus, dolphins are just the coolest animals ever. And so who wouldn't, like to be a dolphin? They have a fairly erratic sleep schedule. They do have a tendency to have more health issues and insomnia than many of the other chronotypes, but they do have a tendency to wake up early, much like a lion. I would consider them much like that early bird lion, but just with a nice big dose of anxiety that seems to follow them around just about everywhere that they go. They make a list, they check it like 10 times type of people there. And so what happens is you actually go through all of the chronotypes when you're younger. So as a baby, you're a lion, right? Babies go to bed early, wake up early. In middle school, you're a bear. As an adolescent, you're a wolf. Then your chronotype seems to set into one of those three categories. And then you kind of stay there for about 30 years. Now, during that 30-year period, that's when we start to see the dolphins really come out. Because they have this irregular sleep schedule, their anxiety is up, things of that nature. Then right around 50, 55, which is my age range, everything seems to go a little bit backwards. And so many people start to wake up much earlier than they did. Now, this is naturally, by the way, this isn't like with an alarm. They have a tendency to, change the way their mood is, their thinking and things like that. And so I went from being a very late night person where I never went to bed before midnight. Now, dude, I'm yawning by 10:30, and I'm like, I'd like to go to bed right now type of thing. But I'm up at 5:30, 5:45 many mornings. And so I've shifted my circadian rhythm. And now this was not on purpose. This is a natural, well-known shift. And this is because your melatonin production has a tendency to move a bit earlier. So it is a biological function. But people who are listening to this podcast are probably saying, oh, well, that sounds like me. I used to be a night person. Now I'm either a midday person or a morning person. Some people who are morning people become even earlier morning people. They're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going to bed at 8 o'clock at night. I want to be clear. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people say, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm getting up too early, or they may stay up until 10, wake up at 4 and say, I'm only getting 6 hours of sleep. Is that okay for me? Look, let's be fair. If you wake up in the morning and you feel good, you're bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, you're ready to meet the day, you've got energy, you're active, I don't think it matters that you sleep 6.5 hours. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's taken years off the back end of my life and I'm already kind of towards the back end of my life, Michael. I want to keep all my time here. Don't worry so much about that. There's very little data to suggest that sleeping 6.5 hours is going to take off any years off the back end of your life. Now, if you're medically frail, if you've got high blood pressure, if you've got arthritis, if you've got diabetes, those types of things will have an effect if your sleep is not as long as you need it to be. Also, during those years, people have a tendency to put on a little bit of weight, and that can also cause something called sleep apnea. Now, for folks who don't know, sleep apnea is a medical situation, very serious one, where people actually stop breathing in their sleep. Right. Generally speaking, we like our patients to breathe, right? It's good. Generally speaking, we like them to be active and all of that. And so snoring is one of the main symptoms. But to be clear, everybody that snores does not have sleep apnea. It appears as though about 50% of people snore, but only about 20% of people have sleep apnea. So it's a two-way street, but the traffic isn't the same on both ends of the street, if you will. And so what I tell people all the time is, look, if you snore, or your bed partner snores, or somebody's complaining about your snoring, here's the real question to ask is, did you hear me stop breathing in my sleep? Or did my snoring stop for a brief period of time? And then did I kind of, make a snorting sound and then wake up for a second and then go back to sleep? If somebody even hears it one time, it's worth getting it checked out, because if they heard it once, it's probably happening a lot more than that. And sleep apnea has some very serious consequences if left untreated, especially if it's in the severe or moderately severe category. So let me explain to you what that means. And so mild is somewhere between 5 and 15 times an hour. That might seem like a lot, but that is actually considered mild sleep apnea. 15 to 30 times an hour is moderate, and 30 and above is severe. And so if you're in that moderate to severe category, it's important for you to talk with your doctor, especially if you tell me things like, well, I wake up with a headache in the mornings, or my mood fluctuates a lot, or I'm so sleepy during the day that I take a nap. Don't get me wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with napping as a general guideline, but if you require a nap almost every day and you're getting 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep at night, I'm wondering if the quality of the sleep that you're getting at night is good, right? That's where something like sleep apnea could come into play, narcolepsy, or the other sleep disorder that's very prevalent in people that is in this age range is something called restless legs syndrome and periodic limb movements. So restless legs is a situation where when you lie down, and it really only happens when you're not moving, is you get a creepy, crawly feeling on your legs, or you're constantly, extending your toes and fingers and bringing them back in, cracking your knuckles. You have this kind of almost antsy feeling to you. That can be incredibly disruptive because when you lie down to sleep, all you're doing is moving around the whole time, right? And that's why they call it restless legs syndrome. Many people also twitch throughout the nighttime. That's the periodic limb movements of sleep. And what both of these situations do, restless legs has a tendency to make it so that you don't have an easy time falling asleep. Periodic limb movements has a tendency to put you into the lighter stages of sleep, right? And so when we talk about sleep stages, there's really two main sleep stages that we want, especially as we kind of hit this 50 and above age range. One is stage 3, 4, or what we call deep sleep. This is your physical restoration, right? So this is kind of like bringing the car into the body shop and getting the dents and the dinks and the scratches pulled out. And then there's REM sleep, which happens in the last third of the night. And this is really where we have our mental restoration. We've now discovered that REM sleep is where we move information from our short-term memory to our long-term memory, which can be very important. But in stage 3, 4, something that a lot of us are often thinking about is this is where we've discovered, and this is a fairly recent discovery, of something called the glymphatic system. So the glymphatic system is kind of, I call it the waste management system of the brain. Right. So, waste management, those big trucks that come and empty your garbage and that whole thing, make kind of a big racket early in the morning. Well, what the glymphatic system does is every time you go into deep sleep, which again is that physical restoration, it comes in and it grabs all of these proteins that have a tendency to collect in your brain and almost strangle your neurons. The strangling of neurons is basically what we call Alzheimer's. And that's obviously something that can be on a lot of people's minds. So the proteins that it has a tendency to pull out are called beta amyloid and tau. These two proteins are now fairly well documented. There's been a lot of research done on them. And while they're important during the daytime, we got to get rid of them because when there's too many of them, it gets crowded up there. And that's when the memorial content starts to drop. That's when you are not able to remember things. That's where you can have a lot of these different effects.
Fascinating. And as far as the having some, I think what you said was 20% of people have a form of apnea.
Yep, 20% of males. Yeah, 20% of males, about 12% of females. But in this age group, the ratio actually turns into almost an equal one. Because as we get older, when women go through menopause, they have a tendency to put on a little bit extra weight. And so I want to be clear, apnea is not just a heavy person's disease. Anatomy plays a tremendous role. If you've got really big tonsils and, lots of congestion or lots of allergies, things like that, that can certainly cause it. But as you put on the pounds, men in particular, if you ever notice when guys gain weight, it's in their face. Right, which means their neck is starting to get a little bit thicker. And that's really where we start to see this crushing of the windpipe and a lot of things going on. Also, many people don't know this, but men have a fat pad in the center of their throat for cushioning. And as you gain weight, it actually starts to expand. And so it's very interesting to kind of look at that. Now, when we look at sleep apnea in particular, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, that CPAP machine, right? That's what I'm going to have to end up on. That looks horrible. I'll never be able to do it. I've got all this claustrophobia, things like that. Number one, let's just break this down for a second. CPAP works and it works well. 99% of people that we put on CPAP machines actually have their apnea almost completely removed. So it's a really good treatment. Now, to be fair, does it cure it? No, probably doesn't. Because remember, this is an anatomical situation. The only way that you get rid of it is to pretty much cut it out, right? Meaning surgery. Now, I am not the biggest fan of surgery, but there are some newer surgeries that have come out that are actually much less surgical, if you will. One is called Inspire. This is a very interesting device. You've probably seen the commercials for it on television. They put a little battery right underneath your clavicle and then two pieces of wire go up to the back of your tongue and touch your vagus nerve. And it sends a very, very light electrical signal. Now, I want to be clear, you don't feel it, but what it does is it helps retract or rather push your tongue forward and open up your posterior airway space, allowing for more breathability, more air, more room for air to get down in there. Inspire has been really remarkable. I got to be honest with you. When it first came out, I was like, there is no universe that people are going to want to have a surgical intervention like this over CPAP. I got to be here to tell you, I think I'm wrong on that one. There's quite a few people. This has become much more popular, and they're getting better at it now. I mean, the surgery's been around for almost 15 years, so they're really getting quite good at being able to do this and do it well. Also, the newest thing that's come out, which I find just fascinating, and I put at least 3 different patients on it, is called Excite OSA, EXCITE. OSA.com. We'll put the link into the show notes. But what's interesting about this is you wear it during the daytime for about 20 minutes, and then it can replace CPAP, especially for the milder cases. So remember, I said the moderate and the severe is the ones we really want to treat. The reason that we don't treat the mild, the moderate and severe is what I meant. The reason we don't treat the mild ones as much is because it's not fun wearing a CPAP machine, okay? But if you've got severe apnea and I stick a CPAP on you, you feel so damn good the next day, you don't care, right? You're like, it's worth getting used to it like that. But in the mild cases, sometimes it's harder to feel that. This Excite OSA, Inspire, and also dental appliances. This is like a mouth guard. You see the football players wear, but it's an upper and a lower, and the lower slowly brings your jaw a little bit forward, thereby opening up that posterior airway space once again. Can be very, very effective for mild to moderate sleep apnea. And so I want people to know that, number one, as we get older, it's definitely something we should be thinking about. Number two, the treatments are not set in stone. It all depends upon your severity. It depends upon your anatomy. And so going to a board certified sleep specialist turns out to be very, very important because they really know all the options that are out there. And believe it or not, there are now dental or dentists that have become board certified in dental sleep medicine, very highly skilled individuals who can create these mouth guards that can be, super duper effective.
I mean, as we're talking about this, talking about the intersection of mild apnea and Alzheimer's, because if what we're doing is we're disrupting the sleep cycle and we're not cleaning out the proteins, these proteins even slightly, that seems like not such a great thing.
You're absolutely hit the nail on the head. And there's actually been some fairly recent data looking at mild sleep apnea and the propagation of beta amyloid and tau, right? And because what happens is when you have mild sleep apnea, you fall asleep, you go from stage 1 to stage 2, from stage 2, you start to get into stage 3, 4, and then you wake up because you're having an apneic event, right? And you don't get into stage 3, 4 where the waste management can kind of clear all this stuff out. And so again, this accumulation occurs. And so we are starting to see, especially in the milder cases, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've had several patients where once we got them their apnea fixed, what we thought was dementia and Alzheimer's literally disappeared because they were breathing and getting into these deeper stages of sleep where this lymphatic system can kind of kick into gear.
Apnea is a really serious thing.
Yeah. And people think, I've had it forever. I never got it treated. I've known about it since I was young. I snore like a freight train. You can hear me down the hall. I get it. And when you're younger, maybe you're okay with feeling sleepy all the time. When you hit 50, 55, 60, you need to get this stuff checked out because the long-term implications, and we're not even talking just brain implications or neurologic implications like Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's, but like we're talking cardiovascular here, right? And so if you let apnea go too long, what ends up happening is when you stop breathing in your sleep, your heart rate begins to slow down, merely to conserve the oxygen, right, in the system. Then your brain says, oh crap, there's no air. So your heart rate has to speed up to wake you up to breathe. So your heart rate is slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, speeding up. It puts an increased load on your heart in particular. And over the course of time, you end up with what's called an irregular heartbeat, okay? That can lead to hypertension or high blood pressure. Now, for folks out there who are on blood pressure medication, which helps control that blood pressure, in many cases, I mean, I think it's north of 70% of the cases of people with high blood pressure, there is a component of sleep apnea. So a lot of cardiologists are now getting into the game and saying, hey, we need to test these people. And here's the good news. It used to be you had to go to the lab, you had to have 27 electrodes put all over you. It wasn't a very comfortable place to sleep. Now you can just order it online. It can come to your house. You can put it on yourself, right? Wear it in your own bed, send it back, have a consult via Zoom with the doctor, and learn absolutely everything that you need to know. I've even seen one situation where it's a ring. It literally looks like a ring. It's kind of like a mood ring. It's kind of one of these big honkers, right? That you stick on there and you wake up the next day, you send the ring in and it's monitored your apnea, your oxygen, your heart rate, and it gives you a score. It's really quite remarkable. So to be fair, almost nobody has an excuse in our age range and above for not taking a look to see whether or not you've got sleep apnea. Also, the other big thing, diabetes. So we know that a large component of diabetes can have to do with sleep disordered breathing or what we call sleep apnea, right? And so when you're not breathing well, your insulin spikes at all the wrong times, you're not digesting sugar well, it can be a real mess. And of course, when you're diabetic, you can end up with things like neuropathy, and there's all kinds of problems with diabetic foot care and people losing toes, amputating limbs, things like that. Not fun stuff to deal with. And I mean, it's pretty simple. Now at this point, you can order online, get a test, sent to your home, and you can figure this stuff out. You really should.
Yeah, that's the thing. We have agency and we should use it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think it's one of the great delusions of our time that like we do not have agency. It's like an act of God and I just got to suffer. No.
And you remind me, I was talking with my father. He's 85 years old, and he has severe heart condition. He has coronary heart failure. He has left ventricular hypertrophy. He has atrial fibrillation. He's overweight, almost to the point of obesity. And I have these discussions with him, and you know what he says to me? He says, "Well, I'm 85," and that's his answer. And I'm like, dude, like, are you kidding me? Like I could, if you let me come down there and get a hold of you for 6 weeks. And by the way, I finally got him on a CPAP machine. We can really change your trajectory. Like, I find that a lot of people in that age range, at least my dad used to say, he'd say, when I cross the finish line of life, Michael, he's like, I want all 4 tires to be bald. I want the radiator to be blowing up. I want to really use it up. And I'm thinking, that sounds awful, right? I've been in hospitals where people are dying. I mean, I had rotations. It's not a good place to be. When I cross the finish line of life, as they call it, I want to be zooming across. I want to be an active member of my family, of my community. I want to be giving back to the world. I want to be, have that agency and be able to get out there and do much the way, a lot of the people on your profiles are, right? I love the profiles that you do. And so many of those people are, in their later years are really affecting the world. You know how they do it? By taking care of their body.
I tell people your head's great, but it sits on something. It's called your body. And you really need to take care of that. And I think that, I don't know, Michael, it's one of these funny things that I hear all the time. Like, oh, I can't do anything about whatever this is, or worse, I don't deserve to take care of whatever this is, or people are doing sort of the ROI in their heads, like, oh, well, geez, if I go to the gym, that's going to take me an hour a day. And is it really worth it? And it's like, well, yeah.
Yeah. Number one, yes. Right. But number two is like, don't look at it like that. I mean, even if you just walk 20 minutes a day, right? Even if that's all you do is walk 20 minutes, take your dog, walk down to the mailbox and back, whatever it is, start, right? And then the habit will compound upon the habit will compound. And then you start to, do things. Now, look, you don't have to get crazy about it. You don't have to be doing saunas and ice baths and, be a biohacker with it all. Although there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, I like to participate in a lot of those fun things. I know you and we talk about those things all the time, right? But just getting yourself active is really, and because once your body is active, your mind stays active. Doing Sudoku, but sitting in a chair all day is not doing anything for you. I can assure you.
No, the big thing that your brain does, Yeah, okay, you have thinking, you have cognitive ability. The main thing it does is it controls your body.
Yep.
So, if you want neurogenesis, move your body in a new way or just keep moving it. And
Right.
that's like people ask me like, oh, what's the secret to like all this? And it's just like exercise.
Yeah.
It's it's not that hard.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. I saw a really interesting statistic that there's a new sport. Many people have probably already heard about it. I love it. It's called pickleball, right? And people are really getting into it. It's fantastic because you don't have to have this amazing cardiovascular stamina to play. You can be very good at it and be competitive. You can play with your children, your grandchildren, what have you. Like when my kids are home from college, my wife, we get a court over at the public courts, and we have a blast goofing off and laughing and having a good time. And then we all go out for dinner. The social aspects of it are equally as important as the active components are. And it's family, and it's about love, and it's about enjoyment and joy and things of that nature. And it's just not that hard to find stuff that you can do, right? It's just not.
The sports that have the greatest intersection with longevity are racket sports. So
Yeah.
ping pong, badminton, and I'm guessing that pickleball hasn't been around long enough, but
Right.
It's the eye hand coordination sports.
Yes. Tennis is a big one. My wife's a big tennis player. And it's just, and yeah, okay, maybe the weather in your area isn't so great to do something like that. Look, then go to the gym and swim. Swimming is another fantastic thing that you can do that's overall good for your body. I mean, and if we want to bring it back to sleep, if you're not a great sleeper, the single best way to improve the quality of your sleep is to be a daily exerciser. And again, you don't have to run a marathon. Okay, go for a walk. Go for a swim. Go do something that makes you active 20 to 30 minutes a day. And again, you don't have to be all out. You don't have to be winning the gold medal type of thing, but you will be shocked at how well it really affects your overall system.
Just to get into a little bit of science on that, my understanding is that activity and metabolism produces something called adenosine.
Yes, that's correct.
And adenosine is sort of what would you call it? It's sort of the push to sleep.
It is. So as adenosine accumulates in your bloodstream, it goes to a very specific receptor site area in your brain. And as you get more and more of it, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. And so this is partially the reason why exercise helps propagate good sleep, right? Is you get more adenosine flowing through your system. Your cells are eating more glucose. One of the things that comes from that metabolic situation of eating glucose or metabolizing glucose rather is adenosine, and it works its way through your system, and it's really quite helpful. So again, I mean, I want to be very, very clear. You don't have to run a marathon to do this, but you do have to get off the couch, right? I mean, I think somebody turned to me the other day and they said that sitting is the new smoking, right? Yeah. It's just going to kill you over the course of time.
I believe that 70% of the benefits from exercise, if you're going from zero,
right?
So if you're going from zero, 70% of the benefit comes from doing exactly what you said. Just like a 20-minute brisk walk every day gets you 70% of the way there.
Absolutely.
There's another 30% that you can do if you want, but if you don't feel like it and you just want to do that, it's way, way better than doing zero.
Absolutely. And it can be social, like combined with, going to see your daughter, your granddaughter, and being active with them, or have a group of walking buddies in the morning where you all talk, whatever it is, sports, politics, stock market, whatever, who cares, right? It's just out there and being active, being social. When I go to the gym and I'm on the treadmill, I strike up conversations with the people next to me, as long as they're not, trying to do something cuckoo and crazy. And you meet some very nice people who are active. And once you start to find a group of people who are active like you, then all of a sudden they say, hey, you want to go grab a cup of coffee, or let's all go have dinner together. And now you have a better social situation going on. I mean, one of the biggest factors in what are called blue zones, right? So for folks who may not know, blue zones are these areas of the world where people live very long lives, very healthy lives, like well into their 90s. They found that probably the biggest thing is social interaction, right? Is having friends and not being by yourself and stuck in the house and things of that nature. And so, do yourself a favor, get out there. You would be shocked at how many people, and this is the biggest surprise to me, was young people don't mind hanging out with people who are a little bit older than them, especially Generation Z, as they call them. it's very interesting because they're like, oh, you've already done all this stuff. You've got all the hacks that are out there. And it's a lot of fun. Like, I love hanging out with my son's friends and hearing what they're doing in their lives. And then they say, oh, Dr. Breus, what do you think of this? And I actually have opinions on different ideas and they're very interested. They're very respectful. And they're a lot of fun to hang out with. So you might be surprised at who are some of the friends you make.
25% of ageist readers are under the age of 30.
There you go. Right. I mean, that proves it right there. It's like they're figuring out where's the wisdom. I tell my son all the time, the difference between intelligence and wisdom is time. That's it. Right. And so we've all got a lot of time, and so I feel like we're all kind of getting into that wisdom part of our lives. And I enjoy spreading that. I enjoy sharing that with folks. It's good for me as much as it is good for them.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you for your time today.
Always
we talk about all kinds of interesting stuff, as we always do.
We do indeed. We do indeed. We have a tendency to chit chat quite a bit. But no, it's always my pleasure. I love this whole group. I love this idea of people, and as we get older, getting better and really understanding who we are and what we're all about. So thank you for the honor of being able to address your crowd. And I always enjoy spending time here.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, man. Have a great day.
You too.
Mm-hmm. Bye now.
Bye.
The wonderful Michael Breus, everything to do about sleep. And if you're not sleeping well, none of the rest of this stuff is going to work. We're going to get with Just Try This after a quick word from our sponsor. The first sponsor of today's show is Timeline Nutrition with their breakthrough product, MitoPure. We all know how important mitochondrial energy is, and especially maintaining muscle and strength as we age. Urolithin A, which is found in MitoPure, has been clinically proven to increase muscle strength and endurance with no other changes in lifestyle. Urolithin A is essentially upgrading your body's cellular power grid, giving your body the energy it needs to optimize. I've been using MitoPure for a few months now, and what I can tell you is there is a noticeable change in the way my muscles re-energize after I use them. What that means is, say I'm involved in some intense activity in the gym or maybe some sporting activity. Normally, the next time I did it, I would be, kind of tired. I would be sort of gassed out. That doesn't seem to happen with this. And all I can imagine is because my mitochondrial grid has essentially been upgraded, it's not just my muscles that are getting upgraded, it's all the other cells in my body because they're all powered by mitochondria. Go to timelinenutrition.com/ageist, use the code ageist at checkout, and save 10% off your first order of MitoPure. This week on Just Try This, our suggestion is that before you go to sleep at night, take a moment to review the day. Pick out a couple of things that went really well, problems that you solved, obstacles that you overcome, or just maybe something fun that you did that day, and acknowledge it. We need to acknowledge the good things in our lives and the progress that we make on, the various little irritations, the things that we can make go away. And it's good to do this just before we go to bed so we can keep those thoughts, those positive thoughts of achievement in our minds as we go to sleep. We'll sleep better, you'll feel better. So tonight, before you go to sleep, take a moment to acknowledge some of the good things that happened to you today. Thank you for joining us on the Super Age Show today. It is great to have you with us. If you can, please leave us a rating. Please leave us a comment. And if you really like what we do, hey, share this program with somebody you like and encourage them to subscribe. That would be great for us and hopefully great for you and them too. Next week, we've got another great show. Until then, everyone, have a wonderful week. Take care now.